Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sanctum of Integration, the series. I am Nino, and Lux is here with me, and we are diving deeper into part two of the Divine Feminine. Today, we'll be talking about if somebody can be both Divine Feminine and Divine Masculine, and what does that look like? And we'll dive deeper into really this question that we pose to each other of if you're choosing one, what does that look like? And does that mean that you're rejecting the other outright? Lux, would you like to take us off into what your idea is on whether or not you can be both divine masculine and divine feminine, or if you have to choose one?
Sure. I think it's a good idea for us to start off with that sort of tender question right from the get-go and make this a clarification that you and I absolutely want to come at this from a gentle perspective. We're not pushing someone to kind of choose one or the other, one at the cost of the other. However, I will also say that in this day and age where we are so sensitive to being all inclusive, sometimes I think we tend to wash out a little bit of need for polarity. I actually don't think there's anything wrong with polarity in that when you kind of sit predominantly in a divine masculine or divine feminine essence, it's okay to lean more into one than the other because yes, I do believe we have a balance of both, but in the nature of the universe, there are many, many incidences of polarity. And I do believe that this is one of those cases. And so for me, I resonate very deeply as a divine feminine. The more and more I explore it, it feels good to me. It feels expansive to me. It feels right to me. And so simply because of the nature of my journey and what I feel I'm called to do in this lifetime, I not only resonate with divine feminine as my dominant energetic essence, but sort of as an identity. And that's simply because that's my crusade. That's what I'm a passionate speaker about, is all things divine feminine, which we'll get more into that in a little bit. But yes, so to me, it is sort of a choice, but at the same time, like you had mentioned in part one, we are encompassing a wholeness about this. It's not about choosing one at the expense of the other. It's about understanding that you are whole in a balance of masculine and feminine energy, and yet it is okay to lean predominantly into one or the other as your energetic essence, or even as an identity, like I choose to do so. What would you say is relevant for your experience in all things discovering divine feminine?
Yeah, that's a great question. And first, I would like to say that I really like how you're explaining there's this difference of your essence being feminine or masculine and taking on the identity, the role of feminine or masculine. Because at the end of the day, we have both layers. I think we try to think about things as black and white, right or wrong, very separate from each other. But when we start to think about things as layered, polarity, the yin and yang, they're both present and one is not absent from the other one. So the identity aspect is you choosing or I choosing, like, yes, I am divine feminine. I have very feminine qualities and natural instincts that resonate more with the feminine essence. And I choose an identity that is feminine, right? So putting that together, I would say for me, my journey with feminine and masculine really started when I was much younger and was told that I was too sensitive. And for me, that was like the epitome of my feminine nature, to be very sensitive, to be very emotional. And because I was presented with this idea that it was too much, I started to veer a little bit more into the masculine side, hardening myself, getting that tough, thick skin to, survive in this world. You got to be tough. And that slowly led me into this burnout, this um, state of being where I was really rejecting anything that had to do with my own softness. At the same time, my softness started to feel like weakness because I was rejecting her so much. And I felt that I shouldn't be that soft and I needed to be harder. And so there was this constant in thinking that there was something wrong with being feminine. There was this constant battle within my own body and in my life and in my psyche that once I finally hit rock bottom of my body just saying like I'm done with this, here's all of the chronic conditions to make you stop being so gung-ho on life, in a way that doesn't actually resonate with your natural essence, that I had no other choice but to slow down, soften, surrender, really come in touch with my feminine nature. And not just come in touch with the feminine nature, but to really embrace the feminine nature within me. And I slowly started to see this like rebalancing of my masculine kind of coming down a little bit, my feminine rising again. And then there was this battle of who's going to be the one that's on top. And going back to the picture, the image of yin and yang, it's not about them ever being in battle with each other, but is rather them being in harmony with each other. You're going to see them, and in my perception and my experience, it has been this back and forth like scales where I might tip more feminine and I might have a more feminine essence, but I can choose to come in and out of my masculine as needed for whatever I'm working on and whatever is needed in the present moment, right? This is where identity comes in. I am choosing for this moment, even though I'm a feminine being and a feminine choosing essence, I'm choosing to be a little bit more in my masculine this time because it's supportive. And it makes my feminine feel grounded, nurtured, held in such a way that I can be more feminine even when I'm doing masculine tasks.
I really resonate with so much of what you just said. And there's a lot of great layers in there, starting with what you're saying is that you can choose to lean more into one essence or the other predominantly. But I love that you re-support this concept of wholeness, as in when you're choosing to strengthen or bring forward that masculine energy just a little more in the moment. Or like in my case, I have very particular roles and hats in life where I I lean much more into my masculine energy for the sake of structure, productivity, things like that. But what you said so beautifully is that it's supporting your feminine. So in actuality, you're saying these energies inside of you are supporting you and the wholeness of you to be able to be a fully sovereign, conscious, choosing individual. You don't need to outsource your masculine energy to someone else. You have it within you, and that's what makes you a healthy, productive, independent being, by knowing when to lean in one direction or the other, but still having this overarching understanding of this is where I sit naturally, and how do I balance these in the moment or based on the needs at the time.
Yes, exactly. And so my question for you would be, how do you know when you are, and I think we've alluded to this before, but for you personally, how do you know when you're leaning more in your masculine in a way that is not as supportive or not as healthy to your feminine essence as a feminine choosing woman?
That's a perfect place to put this question, because honestly, this is something I still work with myself on a regular basis, because I grew up most of my life, much like you said, being suggested to me that I was too sensitive too much, and that oversensitivity to myself and everything going on around me was weakness. I also grew up in a family that was ultra productive. If you weren't busy, you were wasting time. And it's interesting in my discovery of divine feminine that much of divine feminine creation space is in the void. It's in a little bit of nothingness, and I wouldn't say lack of productivity, but spaciousness. You know what I mean? And so that was a lesson for me to learn and adjust to. And so over my young adult life, as I started to really notice, the harder I pushed and the more I burned out my body to survive, control, function in the ways I was told what was being a good, productive adult citizen of the world, like you said, I had these crash and burn cycles, and it took me a long time to understand that it was because I was leaning so hard into the masculine that I was forsaking my own safety and nurturing as the feminine that needed to be held. And so again, this is still a constant balance for me as I catch myself trying to push a few more things into a day when I know my body's asking me to rest, or trying to expand outwardly, do, is very much a masculine quality. And I absolutely use that in my roles as a businesswoman. But when I start to do it at the expense of myself, and I can feel my nervous system and my human body showing the signs, like you had said, I know of other feminines as well. It's very common for chronic illness to come up, autoimmune conditions, things where your body just says, I'm going to show you that I can do this no more, until you almost have to stop and address. And so I don't live in that place anymore, but I can feel my body communicating to me, hey, it's time to slow down and rest a little. Hey, it's time to soften. It's time to nurture. It's time to give yourself that creative space and that void to let energy flow where it may. And that has been a learning curve for me, but also a really beautiful discovery, because some of my best work comes from that creative void. Some of my most cherished memories, or even feeling most energized, comes from giving myself that feminine space, softness, and openness to let energy flow where it wants to.
A lot of sense. And what this leads me into thinking about is when we start really talking about the choice that we have in having a more masculine facing, energetic, or way of being in the world, I have seen some women that are very much so that I would call a divine feminine, but the energy that they put out in the world, the way that they handle business is, it feels very masculine. It feels very contained. It feels very structured. And you talked about this as far as really leaning into your masculine when it comes to business, whereas, the overarching is still the divine feminine. So do you see this kind of in a way of having degrees of both? Like the both energies are living within both of us? Um, or like are the energies equally present and available to every person? And it's just a matter of choosing which one we're allowing to dominate or to show more, manifest more in our life. Is it a conscious choice, or is it really this like subconscious choice that we're having that's more based off of our wounds, our nurturing, like how we grew up, what society says, and at what point do you start to think that aside from this chronic illness and these kind of external factors that cause some people to wake up to that energetic imbalance, is there a way to choose that without having something so external come up?
That is a really great question. And I think even if we kind of huddle around this concept of business, because that's something you and I both resonate well, or many divine feminines resonate with, because we're still in our seeking autonomy and our seeking of wholeness. We want to be able to support ourselves. We want to be able to lead and grow and expand in our talents and strengths as they may. And very often that comes up for divine feminines as starting a business or leading creatively in those ways. And so what I hear you asking me is, how do we balance that and choose it consciously? And to me, that was kind of the precursor to that, was a bit of an awakening journey, or was the process of integrating parts of me in a way that just helped me be more conscious of my choices. So that when you suggest something like, when it comes to my business, do I want to structure my business because this is what all of the YouTubers and influencers out there say I should be doing and posting, and at the frequency that, the world demands us to? Or am I going to let my feminine essence lead and say, I want to create this way. I want to work in this lifestyle. I want to work X amount of hours a week. I want to have this type of frequency or schedule. And I will say that in the discovery of my conscious choosing and making that the priority, what I've discovered is I have more control and awareness of when to lean into masculine structure and when to let feminine essence lead in my businesses, which feels really good because it feels like I'm not being pulled every which way by what the world, my wounds, the conditioning, all those things tell me what I should be in something as masculine as a container like business. I get to be a divine feminine and a business owner. I get to be a feminine business owner. And that's not just because I have to pick masculine or feminine. It's zooming out just a bit more and asking myself, what am I choosing? And am I choosing it consciously? Or am I letting other factors tell me what energy I should lean into? So I think that's a really great question to beg to our listeners, as well as just because you're choosing or you want to lean into divine feminine or divine masculine, are you aware of when you're letting that lead, or are you letting that lead because of, such as you suggested, conditioning, upbringing, predisposition? Your workplace is a huge factor. We both know how that works in previous forms of employment, where the style of the job can often slide you into an energy that maybe you don't naturally want to sit in. And that's not to say that you're not a great fit for the job. That's just to maybe ask yourself the question of, how can I stay more true to me and still thrive in this workplace, or still thrive in what I want to do in life without feeling tossed and pushed around in my energy I'm emitting out of conscious choice. So that was a really beautiful question. Can you offer any further advice or clarification on that based on your experience as a divine feminine, as a businesswoman, as someone who also works in a very professional, almost leaning towards the masculine field? What would you say helps Nino discover in her body, in her soul, in her essence, when it's time to flow in and out of masculine or feminine?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, and I think it's very important for us to ask ourselves what it looks like and what we do about it when we're faced with these situations where we're in an environment or in a setting that doesn't really support our dominant essence, our dominant identity as masculine or feminine. And you're right, I have a very masculine role as far as my job description, and it's primarily led by masculine people. Even the women there are very masculine. And as someone who is more on the feminine side, I have noticed my pace is different, and it has actually invited me to self-soothe, to self-regulate, to co-regulate with other coworkers, and to learn what the limitations or boundaries of my capacity are, and to be able to kind of work through the edges of that. So instead of seeing it as something that is, woe is me, I don't feel supported by my job right now, I start to really lean back and start to think, okay, how can I support myself in this setting? What do I need in this setting? And how can I provide that to myself? If I can't provide that to myself because my surroundings are not conducive to that, then I have to really start to think about, when do I need to take a break from work? Even if it's just walking outside for a few minutes and coming back just to reset, or doing these mini meditations that are 5 minutes of breath work. These really start to support me in staying in my feminine. And when I don't do those, I find myself leaning very much so into the masculine. And by the time I'm done with work, I'm like stiff and, kind of feeling robotic. And then I'm like, oh gosh, I really wasn't aware today. And so I really say all of that to say you have to see that it is an invitation for you to continue to choose what you're deciding to be, what identity you're deciding to take on. And it is also an invitation to see the kind of like that scope, that range of feminine and how the feminine does also bleed into the masculine. If we think about the feminine and her creation force, she is strong. She is willful. Like you look at water as um, a feminine element, and how water thrashes against rock. And you keep on doing that, and eventually that rock formation changes, right? So we're not saying that the feminine is by any means weak. She belongs in structured places as well, and it can offer containment, but it also is an opportunity for the feminine to really pave the way for what things look like in the workplace. So it's an invitation for the feminine woman to come into those masculine spaces and really reorient the way that those spaces work in a way that is conducive for both energies.
I think you make a really great point, as in these two key things I hear you saying is that though you want to work in this masculine type setting, you understand what it takes to support yourself and remain in what feels like a healthy, balanced place there. And you offer our listeners a compassionate invitation to explore and practice that balance. It's not an overnight decision, it's a practice that you continue to learn and hone in about yourself, as well as what I hear you saying is that when you discover, or when you really start to like love on yourself as, yeah, I'm a divine feminine, this is what feels good to me, and yet here's where I work, you again show that strength of the feminine by initiating the chance to energetically lead, not because of your feminine essence is deciding how the job structure works, but because the way you carry yourself in your workflow influences your day, your productivity, as well as others around you. And so simply by being more of your authentic self, by being more naturally sitting in the essence that feels best to you, you're a happy person, you're a happy worker. And so you're encouraging your coworkers to become aware of the same thing in connection with each other, simply by your energetic strength and leading. One of my favorite phrases that I can't believe we haven't mentioned up until now is that the divine feminine leads the way. And that's a bit more of a phrase that comes with a different type of journey, but to me that very much resonates with me and my life experience of, it's not really about what I say or do or push to get things done in a day or in a certain hat or role I wear. It's about the way I carry myself sets the tone for how it gets done. And to me, that almost means more than the end result, because did I enjoy this process? Did it feel beautiful? Did it feel creative? Or did it feel draining? Did it feel tense and forceful? And so that, like you said, reflecting at the end of the day of, did I let myself do this in a feminine way? Did I need some more masculine? Or how can I reflect on this and let it be a practice of, no problem, I'll try again next time.
Absolutely. And excuse me, I think we've both already kind of discussed this as far as when we've noticed the energy and the change that we want to make in ourselves, and how we have consciously chosen that we do resonate more with the feminine than the masculine. And and it really came from a place of having done some inner work initially, or have come in contact with an experience that made us kind of just open our eyes to how imbalanced we were, or how imbalanced we felt. Even if we didn't logically know the imbalance, the body told us, hey, you're really feeling unbalanced right now. And it had nothing to do with the biology being that we're both females. It had to do with the energetic makeup of the body holding the tension and being able to intelligently tell us you're out of balance. And that in itself, between that body intelligence and the spiritual awakening and the spiritual journeys that we've been on, the inner work that we've done, have really allowed us to start peel those layers of what was conditioning, what was programming or upbringing, into stating for ourselves, I want to change and be more in the most natural essence of who I am, right? Are you seeing how this is playing a part in other areas of your life? Like, we mentioned polarity and how there is not one that is more dominant than the other, but that they can play with each other. When we consider something that we can invite our listeners into, how can they direct a more feminine or more masculine energy in a different area of life that's not necessarily to do with their like appearance or their thought process, but how they relate with the world or with others?
Beautiful. That's a great question. And I think it actually poses the perfect teaser for part 3 of this series. So, what I hear you saying is, as we suggest that we offer our listeners the invitation to explore internally. First, we discover internally what is my dominant essence, what feels good to me, what feels dissonant to me. Once we start to explore that awareness within ourselves, we can then turn outward and say, okay, now that I have an awareness of where I want to lean, what feels better to me, then it's time to start discovering how this essence of me as divine feminine interacts with the rest of the world. We live in a 3D world that's made for connection, that's made for relationships. And so I think this is the beautiful invitation for our listeners to come stay tuned for part 3, which is absolutely about how once you've really discovered and become more aware of what your divine essence is, how does that affect relationships and connections? And I get so excited to talk about that because I personally enjoy how I can lean into my masculine or feminine in relationships in different roles because they get me different results. And I feel good about that. I enjoy it that way. And I know that I'm consciously choosing that. So I would hope that you listeners would eagerly await us for part 3, where we specifically talk about, okay, I know I'm a divine feminine. I know this is where I want to sit. I know this is what feels great to me, my soul, my body. I'm starting to understand where that needs to dominate in my life and where that could back off, or where I could let my masculine internal energy lead a little bit. Now let's explore how that affects dynamics of my life and how that creates results and change in my life that feel like I'm the one consciously choosing and manifesting the results in my life. So, do you have anything else to add before we leave that cliffhanger off for part 3?
Yeah, just that I'm excited for this really juicy conversation that we're going to have on how your desired divine essence really amplifies and also leads how your relationships look.
Beautiful. And I would just like to make one extra tiny mention of, again, listeners, if you're feeling like this divine feminine is a thing that you're curious about, maybe you have more questions about it. Maybe you're wondering, well, I can see where maybe I do have a lot of masculine upbringing, and I can see where maybe I'm having some health issues pop up that I didn't really look at it from that lens before, or I notice these things in my body, or I notice when I feel so lit up and when I feel so tired out. Maybe I need more clarification on, am I a divine masculine or divine feminine? This is where I would invite you to jump into my membership, at least for a time being, to see in getting in the conversation and getting in the community to get some clarification. What feels good? How can I ask other feminines how they discovered their true essence and what it meant to them and how it changed their lives? So if you're still curious, if you're on the fence, or if you're 100% sure, yes, I absolutely am divine feminine and I want to learn more how to lean into it, please, please, please subscribe to both of our channels, because both of us lovely ladies love to talk about things divine feminine all day. But I would love for you to get ready to join my membership and just check out what a supportive divine feminine community can do for you. And I will say that Nino also is a passionate nurturer of divine feminine groups. She does it locally in her community and online. And I just can't say enough about how that's her strength and that's her beauty. And that's her calling, is nurturing other divine feminines. Again, going back to that Mother Mary piece, where she was that bedrock, that foundation of a woman that can hold space for other women or other divine feminines in this context. And I just love that you know, that that's what your strong suit is, that's what your passion is, and we haven't talked enough about it. So please check out both of our content, explore further, because we both have places where we want to support and nurture divine feminines in a community type setting. So thank you for that shameless plug for both of our divine feminine journeys and passions. And we will see you all next time in part 3 of the Sanctum of Integration. Take care.